I want you to propose this hot take to everybody. Let's hear it.
So, holding up here something I picked up from the AIA convention, the
OA plus D. What is that?
The Journal of Organic Architecture and Design. And I had just said to Evan before he hit record that I personally believe that there really isn't a such thing as organic architecture, because the act of humans building in nature is actually anti-nature, regardless of if you're even building with sticks and stones.
Nature, humans, togetherness. I'm doing the international sign of togetherness right here. That's what this is what this is.
I just wanted to see if, what your reaction was going to be on that one, and see if you're like, wait, what the?
Yeah. Buildings are a machine for living. Yeah. I mean,
no, it's well, what's funny is that I've said in the past, somebody would say that what I just said, it's like, well, you're building all these materials and you're using brick and stone and all of this other stuff.
The manufacturing process.
The manufacturer, and it's just like, well, if you think about it, we can't create anything that is not already here. It's one way, shape, or form, even down to the most molecular of the levels, right?
Getting all theoretical here. Yeah.
Getting all theoretical. So, like, really, everything is organic.
See, now you're going too far in the other direction.
I wanted to just, throw out some controversy.
Yeah, controversy abounds.
Because of the project that I have overseas. A lot of the people that I deal with are from either the British Isles, one way, shape, or form, or Europe somewhere, or the Middle East somewhere. And so you hear more or less British English all the time.
Yes.
And so I don't know if I purposely try to avoid using British English just as be a typical American and say, it's not a lift, it's an elevator. It's not aluminium, it's aluminum.
Yeah. According to you. Yeah.
Yeah. But, it's just like, well, we were talking, and I'll pay attention when I'm talking, and it'll be like, it's just like, well, responding to your queries. Like, question. They're just questions.
Oh, jeez. Oh, I like it. No, I like getting a taste of someone else's culture in the.
Oh yeah, I'm
those
kidding.
words. It's great. Control.
I was just like,
schedule. I like that a lot.
Schedule. So what's interesting is a schedule is a program, and a program is a schedule in the RIBA standards.
Yeah, and in program terminology, architectural terminology, you're talking here.
Yes, in architectural terminology. And so that was one of the things. It's just like, have you submitted the program? I'm like, I submitted the schedule, but and then they're like, the program. Like, but the schedule.
Interchangeable words for completely different things. And so,
exactly.
I mean, and there's many of these, right? It's like, I just had one a minute ago. Now I've already lost it. But yeah, it could be confusing sometimes, for sure.
Well, and then there's some interesting things. So I was having a little bit of a conversation today about like issuing out some information. And so you've heard me say this multiple times, the Architectural Supplemental Informations, the ASI,
right,
is not something that is used overseas in the same way or at all in certain locations. And so they're like, I was like, we could issue an ASI. And they're like, what's that? I was like, Architectural Supplemental Instructions. So like, what's that? And I'm like, additional information that we think you need to execute this design.
Stuff that we didn't get into the project before the deadline.
Something we may have forgot, but decided that,
got too low on the list of the things we care about. Yeah.
Well, it's just like, it's the priority list, and it's just like, the biggest part of the priority list was conforming to the program, and getting those drawings out and getting issued for.
I think you said there were different terms also for like the phases of a project versus what we have here.
In fact, what we call construction documents, they call issue for construction. So IFC instead of CDs. But
IFC here is a file format. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, and so you have the DD phase, which is not design development, but it is craft. It's literally just forget.
You just lost it.
I just lost it.
So I've got 1 point. You've got 1 point of being old so far in this episode.
There you go.
Just can't remember the word that you were about to say.
Exactly. Detailed design. There we go. Detailed design.
I haven't remembered mine yet, so you're back down to zero.
So it's essentially it's design development, and let's just say it's basically all of the phase of design development and about 50% of construction documentation all rolled into one. Because at the end of their DD phase, they're actually expecting you to almost have a biddable project with a pretty comprehensive set of design documentation.
I'm pretty sure that's not how they would explain it right there. I bet they would say, we expect you to have a biddable project. Not,
yes.
We don't expect you to almost have a biddable. That's not really an expectation.
True. And then, and it's interesting too, because we're even having conversations about the interpretation of, and you'll love this one, especially as somebody who not only was on the design side of things, but then also started to work in the implementation of the digital practice and stuff. So LODs, the good old, what does LOD stand for?
There's controversy about this. Controversy. It could be level of detail. Yeah.
Level of detail. Yes. So level of detail. So LOD 300. And there is a pretty well-established LOD 300 that BIM managers, at least as far as I could throw them, agree on one thing. Well, it seems as if the level of detail that's provided in some of the overseas documentation are bordering more towards, when you give them a set of construction documents, bordering more towards the level of detail they give is closer to what we would expect out of a shop drawing. And we're like, we don't do that.
Do they have a number that they assign to that, or what are they? That's just expectation.
Their expectations of an LOD 300 are, why aren't you calling out fasteners? Why aren't you calling out this? Why aren't you calling out that? Like, I mean, because, and so I had this conversation with them, is like, the expectations, especially in the States, are, if we are giving a set of documents and we do it off of a basis of design, we'll detail things around that basis of design, but that basis of design will ultimately be, in most of the cases, especially with the projects that you and I've worked on in the past, will ultimately be changed by the low bid somewhere else. Like if we're calling curtain wall Y and curtain wall Z comes in and says, oh yeah, we can do the same thing, but we can do it cheaper. Guess what? Their details are going to be different. So as you and I've always talked about, it's just like, is that where the architects, is that where the effort of the architect should be? Is like detailing these things out to the nth degree,
right?
And so if you ask the people in the conversations that I've had for my overseas project, the answer would be yes. Like, we want you to tell us everything. We want you to give us essentially an IKEA set of documents. An IKEA.
Can we talk about the problems with that?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, they're just flying into my head right now. I mean, that just sounds like a giant pain in the ass.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And when you're developing a fee, rarely will you develop a fee that, unless it's well established beforehand, that the level of detail that you're going to be providing in your set of documents is, shop drawing level documents, which it's rare that you'll find an architect who, let me restate, restate that, because you will find many an architect who can, deliver a, that level of detail. But again, if you're not paying for that level of detail, if you say LOD 300 and it's established that this is what you're going to get an LOD 300, which is design intent, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm just thinking about the constraints that would need to be in place to achieve that expectation.
Yeah.
You have to have a builder with a knowing of building systems, materials much earlier on in a project.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would have to be, I mean, you're actually talking about a completely different incentive for drawings that, like what we're talking about in the US, are the intent is to actually get a permit and to act as the basis of design for the building, and not the actual level of detail which you're talking about, which is usually nowadays, I mean, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, because Cormac, it's pretty obvious architects have kind of ceded this territory to the contractors, but that's really now in the contractors' bounds to build the constructability model, right?
Yeah, yeah. And again, in most cases, when you're doing a basis of design or approved equal, you're assuming that this is going to be a competitive bid. You're going to get multiple different manufacturers who says, yes, I can deliver this design intent, and here's how I can do it. And they prove it through their shop drawings, right?
Yeah.
Whereas some of the levels of detail that they're asking for more focus around sole sourcing. And
well,
and
you're talking about a manufacturing process.
Exactly.
Versus the actual building construction process, where everything's a known quantity, right? When you're going to build a car in a factory and you're going to do a repeatable thing, like, you have defined every single bit of that up front.
Right.
Before you even build that first car, right? Like, so with this, that's a complete, and I wonder where, I guess I kind of see, I mean, we have seen this many, many times where people just put those types of constraints and ideas upon architecture, say, no, this should be more like manufacturing. And there are definitely lessons to be learned from manufacturing cross-disciplinarily and things like that. But especially with certain types of architecture, maybe modular and things like that. But it doesn't really apply, and yet it keeps getting applied to this discipline.
It's rare that you're going to get that level of detail in a project that's competitively bid. In especially, let's just say developer, let's just say public works, things like that, because you are looking for efficiency, affordability, and all of that other stuff. If you're looking for, let's say, the Renzo projects, wherever know that everything
I
is
think
going
of like
to be
Heatherwick. Like, I think of projects where it's like the level of detail to the final.
Well, the level of detail
really
is because those details don't exist anywhere, and so you're going to be ready. Here's here's our next British versus American terms. It's either going to be bespoke or customer.
Okay. Bespoke. Yeah.
But so if you're doing something bespoke, it is going to be something that is going to cost you a lot of money, or more money than what would be a standard off-the-shelf item, right?
Well, think about the conversation we had with David Prutting, right? And the homes that they've built. I mean, custom homes, custom detailing, lots and lots and lots of custom detailing that the architect didn't even figure all the way out, right? Because you have to work hand in hand with the builder to actually do that.
I'll say that honestly, if we're given the freedom, which we were given the freedom a lot more, especially with our clients and whether it's a developer or a public institution or whatever, to work with a manufacturer and do a design assist type delivery, then you really are even taking their standard stuff and somewhat customizing it to get kind of the design intent in, and you're actually developing the details that are making that customization of something standard far more doable.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so you're basically waiting for permission to do this, but I think again, this kind of goes back to I mean, in the way that you said that, it's like, I wish we could. We could, but that's a decision. That's a business model decision.
That's
right.
Like,
yeah. If you're talking about the firm that you're practicing in, doing competitively bid public projects,
right,
then yeah, that's not a thing
well,
that exists.
I'll say, as we're designing something and we're coming up with, say, a design detail that we haven't really done before or something like that, absolutely, I'm going to reach out to the manufacturer, and absolutely, I'm going to work with them to try to make sure I can understand their systems to be able to deliver that design. And so, in a way, I do my own design assist by understanding the systems that we need and understanding my limitations of the knowledge of the system, and then reach out to them to basically ask them, hey, can you help me? Can you help me achieve this? And then they're, oh yeah, we've done that. Or, I give you a great example. When I used some terracotta fins and I had them in the vertical, but I wanted them to cantilever a certain distance that I'd seen some cantilevering in their systems, but not as far as I wanted to go. And we helped work on a detail together, which ultimately was a one-off, but probably something that they could roll into their standard offerings to be able to achieve this larger cantilever with, basically steel and terracotta.
Everything started as a one-off. There had to be a first.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
And now there's a certain terracotta manufacturer who can do some decently long cantilevers of their terracotta fins.
How did you guys achieve that? Can you talk about like the general way? Did you do it with steel, like extra supports, or how did you pull that off?
So typically what they typically do is they actually have like a sandwich and bracketing and things like that. What I did was sort of put threaded rod through the terracotta things to extend
there's like an
the structure.
There's the hollow
there's like
inside.
Exactly. There's a hollow core inside there, and it's ripe to basically almost create a sandwich of steel plates, steel rods, and that, but then bring it back so that you kind of have like a mid-span connection point. But because you're taking a series of terracotta and putting them together to create the overall fin, we just took the whole sandwich and said, okay, now we have connection points here and here, but the structure is actually running all the way through there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
it was fun. I mean, it was it basically looked at like some of their standard details and said, well, what if we did this?
Yeah.
And again, me understanding the system a little bit and them understanding like the technology, we kind of came to it. So, okay, here's how far we can push that detail. And like, perfect. That's
a great process. I think that's also something that Dave talked about when we had that conversation with him, right? Is he would look at a set of drawings and he would say, what are you trying to achieve here? Right? Because he would see something and it would just jump off the page at him like, whoa.
Yeah.
Or, he'd look at the detail and say, oh, that's not how I've normally done it. But it wasn't this automatic pushback and say, no. It was like, well, why? What are you trying to do here? What's the goal? And then once you know the goal, you can work together to come up with, maybe it is a new assembly that you have to come up with, or a new detail.
And in that conversation with Dave was a good conversation about that symbiotic relationship that you need with a builder who understands and appreciates the level of work that it takes to achieve a design. And if he's open to, and, if the builder's open to, and the architect is open to that conversation, like I've learned, and I think I've said this on numerous occasions, but I've learned more about construction detailing from just sitting down and talking to the people who are actually building it. Like, all right, here's what I want to design. Mm-hmm. How would you build it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you talked a minute ago about going to a product manufacturer who spends all day in that product every day.
Exactly.
They know the most about it, and you can't know everything there is to know about all these different pieces of the puzzle. And so why is there so much adversity to working with these other people? And obviously people have gone through really terrible scenarios as well, where it's it's completely adversarial the whole time, and you're getting thrown under the bus in front of the client, and burning bridges. And so, yeah, there's all versions of this story.
As we've said, it's like, who knows their product more than the people making the product? Now, there may be some times where we question, it's like, are you sure it can't do this?
Well, yeah, and you can push them, right?
And you push them. It's just like, well, we really just thought about it as a standard way of doing this. However, that's an interesting question that you pose. Maybe we can increase the cantilever on this thing. We're only saying that we can give you a foot, maybe a foot and a half. You're asking for 4 feet? What about 3? Okay, well, let me see what my design can do, and let's see what you can do, about that. And that was really it. Like, they could only achieve a 1 foot cantilever. I was asking for a 4 foot cantilever. We worked together on some detailing together to try to push and push and push. And we got a 3 foot cantilever, which, at the end of the day, because of a couple of different ways, it still felt like, if you looked at the elevations, it still felt like 4 feet because of the way that I sort of modified my detail.
Achieves the design intent.
And it achieved the design intent. Mm-hmm. I just went back to that. And on my little epic road trip, I went back and looked at that project, and it's still holding up.
I would expect it would be, because you worked on it. You're a mighty fine architect over there.
I get nervous about trying new things and making sure that I can put my money where my mouth is, or somebody else's money where my mouth is.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's your reputation, right? It's because especially with an institution like that, it has to hold up. It literally has to hold up. And
exactly.
It is I mean, that's the risk and reward of trying things, but also, your reputation and your license, or
right.
Your E&A insurance, or, insurance. Yeah. Is not, is also potentially on the line there.
Yes, exactly.
How did we get here from organic architecture is impossible, based on your
how many times prompting. How many times do we see the path ahead of us and say, you know what, I'm going to run through the run through the poison oak.
All the time. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about organic architecture, because and not really the theoretical nature of if it's the definition of organic, but I think about Frank Lloyd Wright, or Kendrick Banks Kellogg, or Bruce Goff, or I mean, there's many, right, that we can name. And I think when I think of
Dodge.
Okay, I don't know that.
I don't either, but it's in here.
I've got a cool book from Aaron Green, which was one of Frank Lloyd Wright's understudies. John Lautner. There's many. And we
talked about my visit to Thorn Crown Chapel, and we know Ife Jones.
So I'm thinking custom details. I'm thinking many custom details on those projects. There's nothing standard or run of the mill.
Or probably every part of it was a custom detail, one way, shape, or form.
Yeah. So nowadays there's a huge. I mean, this has been. I don't just mean recently. I mean modern practice is really revolves around the reuse of kind of a standard kit of parts, right? There's standard construction types. There's wood and concrete and steel, and then there's methodologies, and then there's, especially if you're doing institutional architecture, you're doing wood frame schools, steel frame schools, CMU buildings.
Right.
Custom details are really avoided as much as possible, right? It's because they take time to develop. They've got to be proven.
Right.
They've got to go through QA. They've got to, it's a big thing. But I mean, if you think about those projects that we just mentioned from the masters, right? Those were drawn as they were needed. Do you think they really used standard details back then? Maybe they had some that carried over from the previous project of this is how we want the glass to inset into the concrete wall, kind of a thing.
But if you think about it, where we are now today in our standard details came from those non-standard details, or those bespoke details that didn't exist beforehand, that somebody's like, well, I've never really thought about doing glass that way, but let's give it a shot. And so they do it. And then somebody else comes about and says, you know what? I've seen that Frank Lloyd Wright building. I really would love to do that, corner glazing like that. Can we do that? Well, that was a really custom detail for that corner window. We're going to have to do another corner window. So isn't there anything standard? Let's see what we can do. And then you just start asking people to kind of like do that. And more people keep asking for it. So it kind of evolves into that.
Becomes a standard detail.
It becomes it becomes a standard manufacturing opportunity that I'm not quite sure a lot of people actually try to stretch materials further than they really are. Like the building that we're working on in Baltimore, there's a lot of customization of standard kit of parts to make it feel like there's a lot of custom things on the project that really aren't. They're just an assemblage of a lot of standard things that we figured out a way to make them look custom. So it's a customization of standard, but and that's the thing that's kind of interesting is some people don't seem to be risky enough in that, because then people say, oh, well, that's going to cost a lot of money. Like, well, it's still the same curtain wall. It's still the same this. It's just we're doing this with it rather than that with it.
Right.
What's interesting is like, all of the masters that you named and everybody, in between and they pushed for something that didn't exist. Right?
Yeah. Can I say the word that comes to my mind is daring and bold.
Daring.
And it's like, man, architects rarely are daring and bold. There's obviously some name brand architects who are known for that. And there's ones who do that and aren't. But then, 80-20 is probably even a bigger, offset than that. But it's like 80% play it safe all the time.
Well, a lot of people, I was listening to some conversations that people were having about client service. And, obviously this is a client service driven, profession. We're a service profession, right? And so, but a lot of people sometimes think, well, the client is always right, give them what they want, those kind of things. And so a lot of times we find ourselves not asking if you want to go further, if we want to push it a little bit farther. We don't want to kind of like, upset the apple cart, so we don't. And so we get what we get, which is, I was watching a reel about, a friend of ours, Marilyn, she was talking about breaking the mass. And that's like the trend right now is like all of these like rectangular, one size fits all kind of like designs for like multifamily or
Yes.
and stuff. And it's just like
the new standard.
the new standard of just taking like materials and slapping them onto like pushing and pulling of like the facades and stuff. And it's just like it's not really daring. All it's doing is just basically taking like a bunch of materials and saying, no, it's good. We broke the mass.
Creating detailing opportunities.
Yeah, it's actually creating detailing nightmares.
Right.
And she points that out, pretty well. But it's just creating all of these nightmares, and because it's just like, should those two materials go together? Does that actually make a watertight, seal? Can you flash that properly?
Right.
No. Well, then why are you doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they're just like, well, Frank Lloyd Wright, we'll just go ahead and use Frank Lloyd Wright. Well, Frank Lloyd Wright didn't have flashing. So it's like, yeah, but the thing about it is like he was doing details that just didn't exist. And so nobody knew that you needed flashing until they're like, oh, shoot, Frank, your roof is leaking on the owner during dinner time. Yeah.
Yep. This one leaks too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't mean daring could be interpreted in many different ways, but like architecture and the built environment and how it affects cities and towns and people who occupy those things is gotten really freaking boring and mundane and mediocre. And I don't know, I'm looking for words that are all mean the same thing, but it's like, where's the inspiration in the built environment? Right. I mean, my wife and I are driving down one of the highways here locally and looking around, and it's just like, you just want to poke your eyes out. It's so bad. It's so bad.
Where is the, the understanding of detail and order and proper massing and
like who actually cares? Like the people in charge do not. The ones who are overseeing the urban development that's happening and the way that our cityscapes are being designed and built, there's zero attention being given to kind of the cohesiveness and what it actually does to people, and is it visual pollution? And like, you drive down the streets and it's like, what is going on here? There is nothing redeeming about this.
So remember when we were in Boston last year, and there's this new development, that's essentially taken over all of what was South Boston.
Right.
And if you were to pick somebody up and just drop them immediately into that developed area and said, hey, where are you? You'd be hard pressed to have somebody say, oh yeah, this feels like Boston. You pick them up and you put them in downtown Boston. They were, oh, this is Boston. But you put them in this new developed area where everything looks the same and everything looks generically like everything else anywhere else. And you're like, well, where are you? Like, I don't know.
And that's because it's kind of developer driven. And
exactly. It's that, quick return on the
like
investment.
A bar that's set as far as like what architecture is for and what it could achieve. Yeah.
It is the butts and seats version of development. It's just like, just get it done. Like, make sure everybody's there. Like, we just want to, get in and out and just turn this over. And it's just like, what's the best way? This simple formula of, this just rectangle that, to make it different, we will break the mass.
Yeah, it's an interesting time that we find ourselves in, and the thing is like I've noticed. Well, I mean, it's not hard to notice this, but architects don't know what to do about it, and they're not willing to take on the risk and the liability of becoming the developer to remove that kind of mediocrity quotient from the equation.
We always talk about this, like, what is one of the hardest things? What is one of the hardest things an architect to say? No, I don't want to do that. I think we should do this. I think we should, it's just like, we don't want to say, well, I can easily replace you, Evan, with, somebody else. And
so what you're saying though is like we're totally fine being in the service industry and serving somebody else, because then you're just doing what you're asked to do. I mean, of course, you might be pushing some boundaries in there.
Sure.
But you're not driving the project. You are a much smaller piece of the project.
You're not driving it. You're not quite in the passenger seat. You're in the old pickup truck where, you're riding in the middle.
You're in the bed. You're in the bed of the truck with no seatbelt. You are not strapped in.
So when you're hitting like speed bumps, you see us, jumping up and down.
I have personal experience with that when I was a kid. Yeah, riding in the back of a truck, almost went out. Yeah, when the driver decided to go off a jump with several of us in the back. Yeah,
good old days. The
good old days. The Dukes of Hazzard, basically.
Is it? Oh, how did we get here?
Well, yeah, and how do we get out of here? I don't.
How do we get out of here? It's a good
We
question.
dug the hole. I mean, there are people talking about this and kind of cheerleading this idea of becoming, there is more potential if you're willing to do what it takes. If you're willing to become an architect as developer, or a developer and hire architects, right? Because you understand the value of design. Like, you could take on a different role and then empower others to do that and be the arbiter of what gets built and how it gets built and why it gets built.
I think we talked about this ages ago, but I remember a time when I was doing a school, It was a high school, and the design director of that school district, basically we were doing a design review of, in the early, concept, possibly even early schematic design phase. And they looked at it and they're just like, well, this is nice and all, but, I just think that it's, too nice for, what we're trying to achieve here. And they basically wanted us to dumb it down, wanted us to make it cheaper. I don't think we actually ever did, other than, maybe change, materiality. I think, overall, the design sort of, kind of stayed the same, just tried to figure out let's say, a more affordable way to achieve it. Mm-hmm. And I think in some cases, especially, I know that you and I've, experienced this, is especially like a public project, like, elementary schools and things like that, where, you really are trying to get the biggest bang for your buck. You sort of like, I think the being cheap becomes one of your biggest design tools. Is trying to figure out the best way to do the most with the least.
Sure. That can actually be a really sweet spot to operate in. Right?
Yeah, because you're just like, all right, I want them to have this. I would really love for, like, the school to look like this, feel like this, experience this, this feel like this would enrich the learning experience, all the different things that you want to try to achieve. But that, like, in some of your big ideas, oh, well, that would be really expensive to try to do it this way. How can I do this cheaper?
Yeah, and there's other ways to think about that too. I mean, it could be a sustainability angle, right? It could have to do with daylighting and orientation and thermal comfort and things like that, where it's like the building itself is made out of cheap materials, but it operates in a very different way from what people are used to.
Let's use the word affordable instead of cheap.
Wordsmith it. Yeah, wordsmith it.
Yeah, let's wordsmith it. Because it sounds, it's just like, oh, just make it cheaper. It's just like, if it feels cheap, it is cheap. We're trying to make it feel, nice, but affordable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that I think about Rudolf Schindler, who did
great example,
amazing architecture out of buildings made out of standard materials, right? Off the shelf stuff. He did some really weird stuff. A lot of his stuff was just made out of stucco, right? Stucco and wood and, all wood frame stuff for the most part. But then every once in a while he would try something kind of experimental. There was this one house in LA that they used felt paper as siding, like roofing's felt paper as siding.
I think I know you have.
It's like things like that, which was, that didn't have the longevity that other building materials would, but it fit the bill at the time. Or like I said, it was kind of experimental. But it was like, that was a little daring, right? It was a little bold. It's like, well, what if it's going to keep the water out and it's going to achieve this and it's going to hit the budget, and okay, let's give this a try. Because it's interesting, because I drive around where I live, which is a very rural area. And there are buildings that are very old, that are still standing, that are made extremely cheaply. And they're just out there in the environment, kind of slowly fading. Affordably. There's different standards in different places, I guess is my point here, where it's like the standards are lower here for like what it actually takes to build something out of. And it lasts long enough, I think, for people. And that's kind of an interesting mentality.
If you think about it, like the Usonians were literally designed to work around like the standard modules that you could get at any building supply store. And in that, the reason why they were low, and people speculate, oh, it's because Frank was low. So say no, he was just trying to be efficient with the materials. If the standard 2x4 that you could get on off the shelf is like 8 to 9 feet. Well, we're going to design it around 8 and 9 feet, and we'll build it off of that so that, you can build it this way. It's just the choice of the way you do it and the creativity behind all of that is what's really kind of up to the architect. I mean, I've seen some amazing buildings done by, like Sam Mockbee, Mockbee
Oh,
Coker, when
right,
they
right,
were,
right.
and they were using, CMU and all of that
Tires.
other stuff. And, well, no, that's, I mean, the rural
That's a rural
studios
studio.
yeah, exactly. The rural studio is a great example of that. But I mean, basically using like regional materials is just like, hey, we build out of CMU around here. Okay. How can I, do capital A architecture with,
Yeah.
just standard off the shelf stuff? I mean,
How do I make an experience?
you look at
Yeah.
almost any one of these, like regionalists that, these regionalist architects that, really have got a handle on like what they're doing in their neck of the woods. And you look at some of their work. I mean, Glenn Murcutt, who was a master at that,
Mm-hmm.
and you were getting high capital A, like the capitalist of A's.
The capitalist of A's.
The capitalist of A's, in his work. And you were, and I'm going to say that, it wasn't probably too terribly cheap, but it was cheaper, and so, those are the things that like you can do if you understand the material. I guess it comes back to like, understanding the material, understanding how you detail it, understanding how to make something, that's off the shelf,
Ooh,
do
yeah.
what you want to do, in a different way than kind of like the standard. Just like, okay, well, yeah, that's just an infill. Like, okay, well, that's an infill, but maybe we do it this way.
I think you make a really, really good point here, and that is that.
Holy crap! Let's mark that one down.
Yeah, mark it while you can. Understanding construction is a
Yes.
huge, huge, huge part of this idea of
Yeah.
being able to do something perhaps unconventional, perhaps a little daring, perhaps right. It's like understanding construction, understanding materials, understanding physics,
Mm-hmm.
the experience putting things together and how they go together, how they can be put together, how they can be held together.
Yep.
That is a big deal. And
Oh, yeah.
that I think when you look at the opposite, when you look at, okay, well, I'm going to design a gymnasium at a CMU, like what do? You pull out the rectangle tool in Revit, right? And you draw a giant rectangle and you say, okay, here's the footprint of the gym. Because like you're not even thinking beyond, you're already thinking of it as this standard box, right? You're thinking
Right,
of it,
right.
you're not thinking of it at a component level. And I don't know if I'm really getting to the crux of this issue the right way, but I think you know what I mean. It's like when you think about a Glenn Murcutt building, you can actually see how the house goes together.
Oh,
You can
yeah,
see
absolutely.
the fasteners, and you can see
Yeah.
the raw materials and the relationship between them. And it's still a skill of like that's a never ending path of learning how things go together, but it's also something that you can tell, like, I'm sure Glenn spent a lot of time actually trying to build those kinds of things and not just drawing them and not talking to contractors and avoiding those kinds of conversations. It was the opposite. It was like becoming immersed in figuring those kinds of puzzles out.
Right. And then, I mean, I think about like, some of the things that I've been able to do, maybe on a smaller scale or maybe in just, like certain places within buildings and stuff. It's like, let's try this. And then people look at it and just like, man, this is really cool. I kind of like the way that you did this. And you just think it's just like, well, they're like, how did you think of this? It's just like, I just understood how the steel goes together. And, it doesn't have to like, the columns don't have to just be a single wide flange or, one single bit. It could be, the structure needs to be, a 8x8, HSS. I'm like, okay, well, what if it's two smaller 4x4s, and what if they're split
with a plate
apart
in between,
and with a plate in between, and I've done that.
Start to break it down,
and then it's just like, okay, well, what if this, the structure and the cross bracing do this, and they're connected with a plate rather than a gusset or a welded connection or this or that, and it's just like, understanding the things, you can push it just a little bit more. And it's not anything that isn't standard or unconventional or undoable. It's just a different way of thinking about doing the same thing that everybody does every single other day.
Yeah, that appreciation of that by the builder is rare sometimes, right? But I think again we keep going back to the conversation with Dave, but he was like he understood that, right? He was like, "Oh, I that's interesting," right? Like, and I guess maybe that's what all this comes back to from an experience. So you could be an architect or not. When you're experiencing something and you see something, it's like, "Oh, that's interesting," and that is different. Like it literally doesn't have to be much, but it can be interesting. It can that is missing in so many buildings. I mean, okay, so let's go back to the rural studio example, right? So that's the whole point of rural studio is to give students that experience to work directly with clients who are in unfortunate situations, but it doesn't matter. Like that's where they're doing it because they're doing an amazing charity kind of a service there. But they also then get the build experience to learn.
But they also get to experience design, like real architectural design.
Right.
In that, you know, real architecture design can be achieved affordably. See, not cheaply, affordably. But it really can be. I mean, there's so many beautiful examples of all of this. You know,
I totally agree. One of my mentors who always said, he's like, I don't care what your budget is. We're going to make architecture, right? Like, that the budget is not the constraint of whether it can be architecture or not. It is actually your imagination and what you're and
exactly.
It's also sometimes it's like the set expectations by a client or even by an architect or by a contractor, a builder in that situation. But then it's your job to kind of work through that and you're going to educate them, but you know what I mean? Like it's like,
well, you're going to get these, you know, it's just like, well, you know, I can build it this way. If we use these details, I can build it this way and it'll be this much cheaper. I'm like, you know, and then you say, well, you know, you can't still do it, you know, this affordably by doing it this way, just doing it slightly different than you normally do it. But it's not changing really anything that is out of the norm for you. Other than, you know, like you're so used to doing it, you know, one way and one way only. We're saying that you can do it the other way, you know, the second way, and still be able to, you know, make your budget and not press yourself too far out of your comfort zone of constructing it. You know, I mean,
But getting that experience as a rural studio student, right? And learning how pieces go together and how, because you actually do have to build it. You don't just get to draw how it gets built and then maybe have the chance to see it happen or not. You're actually the one doing all of that.
Exactly.
With a team and working with other people, team sport, right? Architecture, not a solo endeavor. And so you actually get all of those kinds of experiences combined. And to me, that I think prepares you to be a better capitalist of all A's architect, right? Like what you were talking about
capitalist of all A's
with Sam, right? It's like you've actually have the ability then to be more informed with the design decisions that you're making and what's even possible.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I think we need to absolutely make sure we, you know, put a link to the rural studio in the show notes for this one.
Yeah, it reminds me of watching the movie, right? Citizen Architect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which
the documentary.
Do that. You know, it's funny is that I think so far, you know, I've now going into my, you know, second year of, I guess, you know, well, third year of teaching, fourth semester of teaching, whatever. Yeah,
you get another old age point.
Exactly. But we're still even because I
are. It's true.
Is I will go back and I will watch Citizen Architecture because the thing that I love
just
about
called it Citizen Architecture.
Oh Citizen Architect. Thank you. My God, I should be slapped in the head for that, especially since. You know, it's all of my friends from school that are in that, you know, that documentary.
There's actually a website for a firm called citizenarchitects.com. creating hip spaces on solid foundations. Shout out to citizen architects.
Hip spaces. What is a hip space? You know what? I know what hip spaces are.
I think we know.
I ain't going to take that from them.
Yeah.
You know what? Enjoy hip spaces. We should all be trying to create hip spaces.
We should. I mean, that's a great tagline. Yeah. I'm looking it up. Citizen Architect movie. Sam Mockbee and the Spirit of the Rural Studio. All right, we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Yep.
So you go back and you watch this every once in a while, or what?
I go back and watch it. You know, it is probably, you know, one of those movies that I will watch over and over again. One, you know, kind of reconnect and just say, ooh, you know, look, there's, you know, this guy or that guy. I remember these people. Oh, I remember that project. Or, you know, just the nature of like the energy that's being created with that. Where, you know, and I love, you know, some of the interviews that they've got with Peanut, and if you guys go and you watch it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And he'll, you know, he basically calls it, you know, he calls out architects, you know, from the get-go, and he basically says, you guys aren't here for us. You're here to like, you know, go and do all these fancy houses and stuff. And they come to find out that, you know, we are there to actually build for people who, you know, normally wouldn't be the ones hiring architects. You know, and that's what we should be doing is like, you know, any and every endeavor of architecture that we, you know, partake in should be, you know, trying to achieve bringing architecture to everybody, not just those who can pay for it.
Well, there's everybody. That part of it, but it's like and then there's like the project level, which is elevating. You need to elevate. Find ways to elevate the experience. Find ways to elevate the environment. Find ways to elevate the enterprise in which you are contracting with, right? The organization. Elevate the experience of the people who spend their time there, right? Who are going to be inhabiting that space in one way or another. And sometimes that's at odds with the business of, you know, this industry, and because it's like, no, how can we do this faster? How can we do it cheaper? How come it doesn't work like this? How come it takes so long? How come, you know, all these things, and I think, you know, kind of getting back to those values of, well, why'd you get into this thing in the first place? What is it about this that drew you in? And to me, that I always go back to that idea of like finding ways creatively to elevate. No matter what the budget is, no matter what the brief is, there's a term for you from the European side of things. What's the brief, right? Yeah. You know, it's like there's things about it that you can find that aren't listed in the brief. They're not in the scope. They're not in the program, right? There's other aspirations, and you get that by learning what those people are wanting to achieve. It's like when Dave says to the architect, "What are you trying to do here? Like, what's the idea? What's the goal with this piece?"
Exactly.
As the architect, you have to do that with the clients, and you have to do that with the organizations, right? And tell me something that I can't just read on your website, and that this program doesn't tell me about you. You know.
I mean, nobody got into this profession to just do, you know, the code compliant building. You know, it's why, you know, like any builder can do a code compliant building. You know, it's the architect who wants to take the code compliance and elevate it, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, as we, you know, should be saying on every project that we do. It's like, what is the value that we bring?
I like the pregnant pause here. I feel like we're at the end of this inspirational talk that we're like that poster on the wall that's just like architecture, you know, punching architecture, kicking ass, and inspiring the next generation. That's what Archispeak's doing.
Oh, we're not the hang in there, kitty. What? hang
in there. Little white kitten.
Yeah, hang in there. We'll get through this. The end is near.
Man, I could see some pretty awesome AI prompting right now. That'd be great. Come up with some inspirational architecture posters.
Let's see if we can get anybody to do that for us.
Yeah, yeah, okay. That's the homework for the audience. Get on that, would you? We're just the idea people. You're going to have to follow through.
Yeah, there you go.